Welcome to Inside the Business of Acting, Segment 3, with character actor, acting coach, and author Basil Hoffman. Basil's book, Acting and How to Be Good at It. And by the time you're seeing this conversation, the second edition of this wonderful book is in your stores and available online. And it's good, great, good. You'll learn a lot. And when we have a final exam, questions from will be on.
People ask me the title of the book, and I never say Acting and How to Be Good at It. I always say Acting and How to Be Good at It with a foreword by Sidney Pollack.
See, that helps.
Yeah.
Right, I meant to say that. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here. This is such a delight because I'm a fan of your work, and I really admire the contributions that you have made to this business and the role model that you have become in the career that you have carved out for yourself and that you continue to have. And thank you for being here to share with all of us about that, because the goal of us being here really is we want to empower young actors in the journey of their own careers by being able to talk about the career journeys and the turning points and the lessons learned along the way by successful working actors like you.
And it's so important for young actors to, and I say this to people and they say, oh no, and I say, I'm not extraordinarily talented. I'm not a gifted actor. And people know who the gifted actors are. They're the ones who win the awards in college and in high school. They're the actors who get the leads in all the productions. They are not necessarily the actors who are going to succeed. And when I coach, especially when I coach children or teach children, the parents frequently say, now tell me if she has talent, or does he have talent?
Yeah.
And I say, I'm not going to tell you that, because it's meaningless. What really is important, if they want to do this, do they have the desire to do it? Because anybody with desire can learn to be good at something as an actor. It doesn't take a great gift. It doesn't take some magical talent. And in my book, I mention a number of famous actors who couldn't get out of the way of people telling them they were no good, people telling them they had no talent. And they became Academy Award winners and had 50-year careers. Some of the best actors ever. And it's nonsense. And I'm not in the business. Like I said before, I don't judge scripts. I don't judge talent. It's not profitable for somebody to be judged on some native ability.
And it's all subjective perception.
Absolutely.
Anyway, and I think it's also important to say...
Did you get that from my book?
I did, thank you very much.
Okay.
Many pages, look it up in the index. Is that I think this is true for young actors, or actors start wanting to be in the business, but I think it's also true for actors who've been in the business for a while, who kind of get stuck a little bit. I mean, that can happen. Is that it's important not to judge yourself and not to fall victim to what can be very, very, very deadly emotional state to be in.
Not to become victim to anything. And when an actor is not succeeding or things aren't going well, that's the time to become proactive. That's the time to really let the imagination work. What can I do? What can I sell? How can I sell it? What can I say yes to? And if one opens oneself up to that, there's no telling how many possibilities will come. That's how I got to writing the books. That's how I got Square Pegs, because I had opened myself to something. And this was... What were the years of Square Pegs?
1983, I think it was. 82, 83.
In 1982 or 81...
Loved the show, by the way.
I loved the show, by the way. Yeah. Do the people here know how you met me? Or
no, because I don't want... You can look that up on the police records, Los Angeles Police Department. Yeah.
But I got a phone call one day, and I guess it was 1981, early 1982. An actress I knew from New York named Alex Elias called me and asked me if I would do a film, and there's no money involved, but would you do a project at the American Film Institute? And I said, well, I might. And she said, well, I read the script and I'm going to do it, and there's a part in it that's just right for you. And I told the director, I said, well, let me read it. So I read it, and it was going to be, a few days' work or a week, whatever it was. I said, yeah, I'd be happy to do this.
Good role, but not about the money, right?
No, there was no money. It was a student film.
Okay.
So I did this for a young student director named Kim Friedman. Well, 2 years later, a year later, Kim Friedman is directing a pilot for a series, Square Pegs, and calls me in to read for the pilot for a character named Principal Dingleman. I get the part, I get the pilot, I get the part on the series. Because I said yes to a non-paying job. And I've learned over the years to not be so quick to say no. And so many wonderful things have come to me. Because I said yes. And then sometimes against my better judgment.
Yeah.
Well, you knew my wife, Christine.
Yes, certainly.
Years ago, I was doing a play, and Christine asked me what I thought of the young man who was playing the other lead. Mm-hmm. And I said, he's okay. She said, yeah, he could be better, though, couldn't he? I said, yeah. She said, why don't you help him? I said, because he hasn't asked, it's none of my business. And she said, okay. So she called this young actor's wife and said, would he like it if Basil coached him? And that's how I started to coach actors, because he was thrilled that I would coach him. Then I coached his wife. Then they started telling other people, and I started to think, I better start charging people. So
that's also in the final, right?
so that was how I started. And then a few years ago, Roger Karshner, who you know, called me and asked me if I could write a book on cold reading.
Yes.
But he only asked me that because he knew I was coaching it and teaching it.
Right.
So then I wrote
doors
that book.
Open.
Then one day, this guy I know named Brad Lamack, an old friend, and I were having coffee, and I remember Brad asked me, do you have another book in you? And I said,
I said that?
Yeah,
he said that? He said that?
He said, whoever, that guy. And
really?
I don't know what happened to him.
Well,
but
it was
anyway,
a very inspiring coffee then that day.
It was.
Certainly was.
And it wasn't, as it turns out, it wasn't a rhetorical question.
It wasn't a rhetorical question. And by the way, actually, Kim Friedman has become a wonderful director, an in-demand director with a ton of credits and
she is terrific.
A force in the business. Yeah. We can't go over Square Pegs, by the way, this quickly. But by the way, because I don't want to start getting emails going, what was it, blah, 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 blah. We worked together on that project. That's
absolutely.
All I'm saying.
Us and Sarah Jessica Parker.
That's right.
And a lot of other wonderful,
and that's
wonderful
all I'm
young
saying
actresses. Yeah.
When I write that book, that was a remarkable show, and the way that you played that character. And Square Pegs has just come out on DVD, so it's become hip and popular all over again for a show that had, I think 19 episodes, one season. It was a remarkably popular show.
Yes.
So will you talk a bit about what happens to a character actor because of the visibility television affords that actor? Like, what did it do for you? All this work you've done on television, I talk about Square Pegs because it's among my favorites of your roles, but you've been regular and recurring on lots of stuff. The issue of the audience that television delivers to you, and the recognition and quote-unquote celebrity television delivers to you in a different way than theater or film even. How has that played itself out for you?
Well, it does a couple of things. And years ago, somebody interviewed Anthony Perkins, who had a fabulous movie career. And Anthony Perkins was asked, do you ever get down on yourself? You're a very successful guy. Do you ever get depressed? And he said, well, sure, just like everybody else. I said, well, how do you get out of it? He said, I go out in the street and get recognized.
That'll do it.
That'll do it.
Right.
So what it does, and actors like to be recognized. And, Laurence Olivier was asked by Dustin Hoffman what made him, and they were sitting at a table. Dustin Hoffman told the story that they were sitting at dinner and just having dinner. And Dustin says to Laurence Olivier, so what made you become an actor? And Olivier leaned into Dustin Hoffman and he said, look at me. Look at me. Look at me. So so a lot of people become actors to get attention because they like to show off, they like to be seen.
Right.
And the thing that got me about acting more than anything else when I first started to do it, when I was in college, I was acting, was being recognized on campus. And people would stop me, people who didn't know me, telling me how much they liked me in the play and how funny I was.
It's a good way to meet people.
You bet.
Right.
You bet.
Yeah.
Taking names.
Of course, by the way, Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman did Marathon Man, the feature, together, and they were just what an extraordinary film and two extraordinary performances.
And two extraordinary actors, yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
And I mentioned Olivier's performance in my book because I have a point to make. Yeah. And in the book I mention a lot of performances by a lot of actors, and I particularly call attention to Academy Award-winning performances and movies and the stuff in film more than TV, because the films are accessible, and people can rent them, and people can look at them. So when I mention these things, it's not that I think Academy Awards are more important than Tonys or Emmys, but it's that the Academy Award performances can be found. And can be seen, and can be looked at, and you can't always find an old TV show, and you can never find a play because the performance is gone.
Well, and
done
so
once and finished.
It's so much. The films are so much more accessible now to us. Yeah. And by the way, of course, Square Peg's remarkable comedy that balances the remarkable drama you've done. So, just quick curiosity question: you approach a comedy role any differently than a dramatic role, or is that process the same for you?
There's one striking difference, and the striking difference is you have to find the humor. You have to know that it's funny. Something that's not funny, there's nothing you have to know about it. You have to do it. But when you're doing comedy, you at least have to be aware of where the humor is, and you have to be aware that it's funny. It's not a matter of playing. And in the second edition of the book, I have a piece on comedy, on approaching comedy, and it's the principles of comedy, which are pretty simple. And the first principle for me is find the humor in it. And one of the principles, important principle, is you have to be serious. I know that one of the, and I should have mentioned it in the book, and maybe a future edition I will. There's a wonderful scene in Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman and Sidney Pollack. Pollack directed it, but he also plays Dustin Hoffman's agent.
Yeah.
And they have a scene in the Russian tea room where Dustin Hoffman is in the dress and the makeup.
Great.
And Sidney Pollack doesn't recognize his client, Michael.
Great scene.
And he's sitting there and he thinks this woman is coming on to him.
Yeah.
And finally, when Sidney is at his most exasperated, trying to figure out how to get rid of this woman, Dustin Hoffman leans into him and says, "I'm Michael. I'm your client, Michael." And Sidney Pollack's character says, "Michael, my God, I begged you to get some therapy." And it's not funny to him.
No.
But it's an hilarious moment.
It is.
And I say in the book that you have to be serious. The character doesn't know it's funny unless he's joking.
Right.
And in that case, Sidney Pollack's character wasn't. And it's the funniest moment in the movie, and one of the funniest moments in any movie.
Is.
And Sidney is dead serious. Michael, my God, I begged you to get some therapy.
And they're begging me.
Are they?
It's therapy, or I have more that I want to talk about. Some nuts and bolts for the young actor. So will you stay for one more?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Basil Hoffman is inside the business of acting with us. Please return with us for segment 4. Brad Lemack in Los Angeles.